we will get started. So I just want to say a quick thank you to all of our speakers. We have a great lineup set up for you guys, and we are going to be talking about a lot of really good topics today. So just a quick introduction. My name is Ashley, and I'm with the University of Maryland Extension here in Garrett County. And this slide is just to help everyone be sure that they know how to use the Zoom controls. To get started, if you can click on this participant box, it will let you know who all is on the call. If you click on the chat box, that's how we're asking everyone to participate and interact with us today. To keep the recording nice and clean, we will be keeping everyone's video and microphone muted so that we don't have any distractions on the call. And so if you have a way, if you'd like to interact, please just enter your questions in the chat. If the speakers are talking, they won't be monitoring it, but after their turn, they will be checking it out and answering any questions that they feel that they can. So to keep your video muted, you can look over here on the bottom left-hand corner. Make sure you keep a red line through your video and your microphone. We appreciate that. So a quick welcome. Again, we're going to be talking about the title of this Brunch and Learn. Our very first one is what organizations represent Deep Creek Lake's stakeholders and who governs the lake. So this is what we'll be talking about. And I just wanted to say a quick thank you to the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation. They are sponsoring these virtual Brunch and Learn sessions, and we hope to offer at least 3 more through the next couple months. And the presentation is being facilitated by University of Maryland Extension here in Garrett County. And with that, I just wanted to do a quick introduction as you're going to be learning today from a lot of different organizations, what services they offer, and as homeowners or property owners here in Deep Creek Lake or in Garrett County, where you can go to get your questions answered. That's the goal of this presentation, is to get good information out to the public and hopefully answer questions that you may have. Some of the questions that University of Maryland Extension facilitates here in the county would be 4-H youth development, money management, nutrition and healthy living, home gardening, and agriculture and natural resources. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for a quick introduction from our president, David Meyerberg.
Good morning. Good morning. I am David Meyerberg, the president of the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation. The foundation is presenting the first in what we hope will be a long series of Brunch and Learn programs to keep you informed about the Deep Creek Watershed and Deep Creek Lake. In 2013 and 2014, a large number of people in Garrett County met throughout a year's time and produced the Deep Creek Watershed Management Plan. In 2016, this was adopted by Garrett County. Our Management Plan Steering Committee had help from all the organizations you will hear from today in putting this plan together. You will find these 10-minute condensed presentations chock full of information, websites, and phone numbers for you to call with questions. Our slides will be available to you. Today, you will see how the watershed requires a variety of organizations, government agencies, and others to keep it healthy. The Deep Creek Watershed Foundation is so pleased to bring this consortium of talented and dedicated representatives to you today. The Deep Creek Watershed Foundation partners with each of these groups to move the watershed management plan forward. With your help, we can enhance these efforts to preserve and protect this great resource for posterity. On this slide, you will find 3 pieces of contact information. The first is an actual copy of the Deep Creek Watershed Management Plan. And you can look at this and determine all the different goals of the management plan. And we're trying to hit each one of them. Second, you can look at the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation to see what our organization does. And if you feel so inclined, you may donate to the foundation. And then the third thing, if you have direct questions for the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, you can get in touch with our secretary, Carolyn Schaefer, her email is there. And as I said, you will be able to get all of the slides that you'll see today. Thank you for joining us today. We're looking forward to seeing you again at the next Brunch and Learn, and we will give you dates by email when that is put together. The first speaker today is Julie Bortz, a biologist for the Maryland Department of Natural Resources.
Thanks, David, and thanks, Ashley, for inviting us to speak to you today about what the Department of Natural Resources does with regard to Deep Creek Lake and our role in the management therein. I just wanted to mention I work for the Department of Natural Resources Resource Assessment Service, but I also serve as the representative on the Administrative Council. And so I'm going to be speaking, kind of giving folks an overview of what the department does here in the lake and in the region. Next slide, please. So just a little background, the state of Maryland actually bought Deep Creek Lake from the previous owner, which was Pennsylvania Electric Company, or Penelec, in 2000, and placed the management of the lake and the buffer strip under the Department of Natural Resources. So a lot of times when I'm speaking with the public, just to try and condense things for them, I tell them that the lake itself and the buffer strip, which is what's called the lake shoreline, are managed by Maryland Department of Natural Resources, or DNR. The watershed, with the exception of state-owned lands in the watershed, is managed by Garrett County government, and water levels or any impact to the lake bottom are managed by the Maryland Department of the Environment. And our three agencies, DNR, MDE, and Garrett County, all work together to implement the Deep Creek Lake Watershed Management Plan and have been formally doing this since 2014. So that's just a little bit of background. I'm going to focus on what we do as the Department of Natural Resources here in the lake and the region. Next slide, please. So there's a lot of different units and several divisions within DNR, and I don't want to go into those in great detail. If you want to click on that link, you can actually see the organizational chart. I just wanted to highlight a few of the divisions and units within DNR that are regularly at work here in the lake and the region, as well as the watershed, that do monitoring, enforcement, and management, essentially, of the lake and the watershed. So I'm going to highlight today the Maryland Park Service, the Fisheries Service, Resource Assessment Service, the Maryland Forest Service, the Wildlife and Heritage Service, and the Natural Resource Police. Next slide, please. So just starting off, the Maryland Park Service, they manage our state-owned parks in the region. And in Garrett County, those include New Germany, Harrington Manor State Park, Swallow Falls State Park, Big Run, Castleman River State Park, and Wolf Den. And they also include Deep Creek Lake State Park as well. And with regard to anything that involves the parks, hiking, biking trails, questions related to that, that would go to the park manager. In the locations that I've denoted in red, those are actually Maryland parks that own state-owned lakes. So those managers actually manage the lake in addition to the state park. As far as Deep Creek Lake State Park, the manager there is Roy Musselwhite, and he can answer any questions related to the state park. He also manages the Discovery Center, which is our educational facility here at Deep Creek Lake State Park, the Youghiogheny River Corridor, and Sang Run State Park. Now, when it comes to the buffer strip, which is basically the shoreline around the lake, or dock permits, or your area of use around your dock, this is managed by what's called the Deep Creek Lake Natural Resource Management Area, also known as the DCL NRMA. And this entity is if you have lakefront property, this is a really good resource for you to go to ask what you can and can't do on your shoreline that is adjacent to your property that's managed or owned by the state park. So I would encourage you to give a call to the Lake Management Office at the 301-387-4112. They can send somebody out and actually walk through what can and can't be done on state land and the process by which those activities are permitted. In addition to managing the buffer strip, the dock permits, and your area of use, they also work in collaboration with the state park, the Deep Creek Lake State Park, to manage the state park boat ramp, as well as activities like fishing tournaments. In addition, the DCL NRMA also manages the steward program, or the also known as the Boat Launch Steward Program. And this is a program that's been in inception since 2014, and that offers voluntary boat inspections for boats entering Deep Creek Lake at the state park. And they have been fantastic at intercepting boats coming in with aquatic invasive species like zebra mussels or hydrilla or other invasive plants and animals. They're our best line of defense against those things, as well as our probably best educational effort is that direct contact at the state park. And that is all run through the DCL NRMA. Next slide. So the Fisheries Service, as you can imagine, their main responsibility is to manage the fish populations in the lake, the streams, and the rivers in our region and area. The western region is made up of Deep Creek Lake, Lake Habib, which is Rocky Gap State Park Lake, Jennings Randolph Lake, Savage Reservoir, the Youghiogheny River, Savage River, and the tributaries, the North Branch of the Potomac, and many of the trout streams in this region. And the western region includes Allegheny and Garrett County. And any questions pertaining to what they do within this region or on the lake can be directed to the district biologist, Jody Johnson, and the western region, and he's located at that number that you see on the screen. Essentially what they do, I talked with Jody in advance of this, and he basically said that a lot of the things they do are to manage the fish populations in the lake and the surrounding water bodies. And they a lot of times will use electroshocking techniques to basically sample fish in the streams and the rivers, count the fish, weigh the fish, and assess the population. And just in mentioning, he basically told me that Deep Creek Lake is one of the best fisheries in Maryland, if not the best, as far as a freshwater lake. And a lot of that has to do with our SAB habitat, our good water quality, and the right species of fish here. So we have a tremendous fishery here, and any questions, again, can be directed to Jody Johnson on that. Next slide. Our Resource Assessment Service, that's actually the unit that I work for within DNR, and our responsibilities here largely include water quality monitoring of the lake and the streams, as well as submerged aquatic vegetation or SAV monitoring in the lake, and aquatic invasive species education, prevention, and control activities are run largely through our service, which is also called RAS, or Resource Assessment Service. In addition, our unit monitors and oversees the State Lakes Protection and Restoration Fund, which is a fund that has basically been administering about $1 million a year for the last 3 years. And that goes to managing our 16 state-owned lakes. Any questions on what we do here at Deep Creek Lake or what our unit does, you can direct them directly to me at my email, or Bruce Michael. He's our unit director, but he's actually retiring at the end of the month. So you can direct them to me, or our new acting director is Rich Ort, and he actually runs the Maryland Geological Survey, which is a unit within Resource Assessment Service. And they do things like bathymetry of the lake. So all those wonderful maps that you might have seen that show the various depth contours in the lake, those are generated by the Maryland Geological Survey, which is again part of Resource Assessment Service. Next slide. As far as the Maryland Forest Service, they basically manage the local forests in the area and basically create tree planting plans or backyard buffer programs for property owners. So if you have property in the region or the county or the lake, and you're not sure if you can get them to work with you on a Forest Service plan, that would be the entity to contact. They actually will create and work with you to make Forest Service stewardship plans for property owners with more than 5 acres of forest. So that's a fantastic service that they provide. They also disseminate trees at certain times of the year, and they participate in the Garrett County Forestry Board, which is a volunteer board made up of private citizens that do a variety of outreach and educational activities. And any questions with regard to the Forest Service or any forest related questions, I would encourage you to direct them to Melissa Nash. She is our forester and Garrett project manager, and that's her email. And they also have a very active Facebook page, which is the link that you see here below. Next slide. And then the Wildlife and Heritage Service. The mission of Maryland DNR's Wildlife and Heritage Service is to basically conserve and protect Maryland's diverse native wildlife and the plants and the habitat therein, using scientific approaches and data for that. There are a lot of folks that actually work out of the Mount Nebo office, which is located in between McHenry and Oakland. And they do all sorts of wildlife related activities to include managing the wildlife management areas, or WMAs, to include Mount Nebo, Cunningham Swamp, and other WMAs in the area. They deal with wildlife response questions and concerns. They issue crop damage permits for deer, build brush piles as habitat for all species, will set bear traps as needed to manage bear-related wildlife issues, and can also be seen planting cover crops in the region to help provide habitat for key wildlife species. In addition to managing those activities, they also manage the annual goose hunt at Deep Creek Lake and Broadford, which falls under their unit to help control the goose population in those areas. They also deal with nuisance species related issues, and a lot of other activities in the region revolve around the management of the wildlife populations, their habitat, as well as hunting management. I would encourage you, if you have a wildlife related issue, I would first call the Mount Nebo office at the 301-334-4255 number. They actually man that phone during normal business hours, and I believe check the answering machine regularly. So that's a number to save, as well as the Western Regional Wildlife Office. And then obviously the 2 emergency numbers at the bottom. If you don't get a hold of anybody there, I would call those and you should get a hold of somebody. So those are some of the common questions that we get, is what to do with regard to wildlife. Next slide, please. And then the Natural Resource Police. This is our NRP, as they are commonly known, is the enforcement arm of DNR. So they are the ones that you see out on the lake enforcing boating regulations. They will enforce buffer strip regulations. So again, that's the shoreline of the lake that's owned by the state. Livery is basically the rental agencies. So they will enforce any of the rental agencies or permitted operations on the lake can be enforced by Natural Resource Management, or I'm sorry, the Natural Resource Police. They can also enforce wildlife and hunting regulations, to name a few. And we have Sergeant Michael Friend. He has been fantastic. He's more than happy to answer any questions you have related to NRP, and his cell phone is there. In addition, if you see any violations on the lake, or you have any questions about, what's allowed, or you think there's a potential violation, I would encourage you to call the 800 number listed on this slide, or the 410 number. They go to the dispatch area, and from there, the officers can be dispatched to the location. Again, providing a dock number or an address with that violation would be important. In addition to their enforcement end, they also have a boater education end of NRP, and they work with the local community, the businesses and the marinas regarding their livery or their rental permits. They also work with boater education, making sure that they have the ability to get people their boating safety license, as well as ensuring safe boating operations. So any questions regarding boat safety or those kinds of things can be directed to Julie Brown, and she's fantastic. I work with Julie a lot of times collaboratively to get information out to the public with regard to AIS, or aquatic invasive species, in addition to boating safety. So that's in a nutshell what NRP does. Next slide. And that's really an overview, a very brief overview of what DNR does here at the lake and in the watershed. If you're not sure where to direct your questions with regard to DNR, you can certainly contact me, and I will work within my agency to make sure that we get that question to the appropriate person. If you're not sure if that question falls within our management, you can also send it to the Garrett County Watershed Coordinator, who I work with on the Administrative Council. And we collectively, myself, MDE, and Garrett County will work together to figure out where that question can be directed. And Garrett County, on their watershed website, they also have a list of fantastic contact information, not just for Garrett County, but for DNR and MDE, to help better direct your questions. So I hope this was helpful, and I'll have some time at the end of everybody's presentation to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Wonderful. We are going to put up a couple quick polling questions as we transition to the next speaker, which is going to be Gary Ehrenholt with Garrett County. So if you guys would just take a minute to answer these quick questions, it'll help give us an idea of what you learned from the DNR presentation and what you would like to hear more about. So everyone should see the poll questions up now. And there are 4 of them. So if you could scroll down and answer those, we would really appreciate it. Okay, thank y'all. Give you just a few more minutes and then we will close the poll. Okay, and with that, we are going to transition to our next speaker. We are going to hear from Garrett County government next.
Welcome, I am Gary Ehrenholt with the Garrett County Department of Planning and Land Management. Thank you to the University of Maryland Extension Service for hosting this event, and thank you for attending. I'm going to take a few minutes to go over a few of Garrett County's services to homeowners. Garrett County is governed by an elected board of 3 county commissioners and administered under a line organizational method with the county administrator responsible for the general administration of the county government. With the exception of the state's attorney, sheriff's department, circuit court, orphans court, and the liquor control board, the Garrett County Commissioners oversee the county administration, public education, economic opportunity, public service, public works, public safety, public health, parks, and recreation. Note that some agencies and departments receive county funding but are not supervised by the Board of Garrett County Commissioners. The Sheriff's Office provides law enforcement services and operates the County Detention Center in Oakland. The Garrett County Sheriff's Office has 29 sworn officers on staff, which include K-9 units, the Drug Task Force, school resource officers, community service, and court security. There are 14 active road patrol units serving a population of over 30,000 with a total of over 650 square miles of coverage. The Department of Emergency Management develops and maintains plans for emergency response, including the County Emergency Operations Plan, the Hazard Mitigation Plan, the Hazardous Materials Response Plan, and they also provide disaster response and sheltering. Garrett County's 911 Center is consolidated with the Garrett County Sheriff's Office for dispatch of fire and rescue, EMS, and law enforcement. Garrett County Communications receives and processes all emergency 911 calls for assistance, including fire, EMS, and police. All staff are nationally certified with emergency medical dispatch training and emergency police dispatch training. The Department of Public Works Roads Division is divided into 3 service and maintenance areas operated from the Accident, Grantsville, and Oakland garages. The Garrett County Roads Division is responsible for the upkeep of approximately 680 miles of roads and 127 bridges. This includes the design, management, and construction of county roads, bridges, and associated structures, including snow removal in the winter. The Garrett County Department of Public Works Utilities Division is guided by the Garrett County Water and Sewer Master Plan. The Utilities Division operates the McHenry Water System and the Deep Creek Lake wastewater system. The Garrett County Department of Solid Waste and Recycling operates the landfill at Oakland Sang Run Road and also operates 6 collection and recycling sites conveniently distributed throughout the county for homeowners to dispose of household waste. The use of these sites requires a permit that can be purchased online or in person at the landfill or tax collection office. Next, I would like to discuss a few ordinances administered by the Department of Planning and Land Management. The Garrett County Subdivision Ordinance, which was established in 1997, establishes 3 categories of subdivision. First, the lot line adjustment, which is a revision or deletion of 1 or more lot lines and does not create any new lots. Next, a minor subdivision can include up to 5 residential lots plus the parent tract. And finally, a major subdivision includes everything else. It's worth noting that the Sustainable Growth and Agricultural Preservation Act of 2012, also known as the Septic Bill, further limits subdivision in Maryland. The Deep Creek Watershed Zoning Ordinance, which was established in 1975, erecting most structures or changing the use of land or buildings within the Deep Creek watershed typically requires a zoning permit. Zoning essentially determines what can be put where. There are several residential designations. Lake Residential 1, there is potential for water and sewer, and 1 dwelling is permitted per acre. Lake Residential 2, no water and sewer service is in the foreseeable future, and 1 dwelling is permitted for every 2 acres. In Town Residential, existing water and sewer service is available, and between 4 and 5 units are permitted per acre. In Town Center, existing sewer and water service is available, and between 5 and 6 units per acre are permitted. In Commercial Resort 2, sewer and water service is available, and 1 unit is permitted per acre. In agricultural resource and rural resource areas, sewer and water service is unavailable, and 1 unit is permitted for every 3 acres. In certain circumstances, 1 unit may be permitted for each acre. Next, the Transient Vacation Rental Unit Licensing Ordinance applies to rentals that are for 14 days or less. TVRUs require proper egress for each bedroom. There is a maximum of 8 bedrooms, and a special exception is required for between 6 and 8 bedrooms. Adequate parking is required based upon the number of bedrooms. TVRUs require a change of zoning use. Building permits have been required since 1997 for all residential and commercial structures and accessory structures exceeding 240 square feet. Within the watershed, zoning permits assure that setbacks for fences and sheds are appropriate. Disturbances greater than 5,000 square feet or 100 cubic yards require a grading permit. Sediment and erosion prevention are required during construction. Stormwater control requirements are determined by the Department of Permits and Inspections and may require plans certified by a professional engineer. Homeowners can sign up for Citizen Connect, where they can pay their tax bills, water and sewer bills, buy trash stickers, get emergency notifications, and customize news on Garrett County's website at garrettcounty.org. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at 301-334-1923 or watershed@garrettcounty.org. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Gary. All right. Next, we will be hearing from Maryland Department of Environment with Jim George.
Thank you, Ashley. And I wanted to put a good shout out to the Maryland Extension Service. If you're not familiar with them, they're a great resource Oftentimes, if they don't have the answer for a question you have, they can direct you to someone that does. They're very well networked. I also wanted to thank the Deep Creek Lake Foundation for sponsoring this event. Although I don't know that much about the foundation, in my work in the Deep Creek Lake area, their name comes up a lot, and they often come in and fill gaps, oftentimes with funding for very important activities. As far as my role, I am a representative of the Department of Environment that helps to oversee the Deep Creek Watershed Management Plan that was mentioned earlier. And that oversight is done through a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Environment, Department of Natural Resources, and Garrett County, and we call ourselves the Administrative Council. So if you hear about the Deep Creek Lake Administrative Council, it's really a small group of people that work behind the scenes on the Deep Creek Watershed Management Plan. And I want to acknowledge Gary, Aaron Holt, and Julie Bortz, who just spoke. They're the two other members of this Administrative Council. So with that, I just wanted to do a quick overview of MDE. I will focus on the water administration aspect of MDE, of which I am a part, but I just wanted to give the broader perspective. If you could go back to the prior slide. The broader perspective is that we have an air administration, a water administration, and land administration. We also have a office of financial capital financing, and that office is where grants are oftentimes given out for things like water plants or wastewater plants or other activities. And they also have an engineering group that does the review of those plans and in some cases issues construction permits. Okay, next slide, Ashley. So this is my contact information, and I guess it will be available after this presentation, so we can go on to the next slide. So within the water administration, we have many functions, and the Department of Environment is analogous to the Federal Environmental Protection Agency. In fact, many of the laws that are administered by the federal EPA are delegated to the Maryland Department of Environment to administer at the state level. And then in turn, the Department of Environment delegates a lot of authority to local entities, which I'll mention throughout the presentation here. First, starting with erosion control. MDE is responsible for erosion control during the construction, when land is developed, during forestry, and agriculture. So we have the authority. However, oftentimes that authority is delegated. In the case of construction, you'll most likely work with soil conservation districts or even in some case, local governments. For forestry, oftentimes, again, you'll work with the soil conservation district. With agriculture, again, you might work with the conservation district or the Department of Agriculture. However, MDE has the legal authority, and if things go really bad, then MDE will get involved, and sometimes it'll end up in courts with MDE taking that action. With regard to after development construction is completed, there's stormwater management, ensuring that the stormwater pollutants are treated and that water is infiltrated back into the ground, where it oftentimes goes when you don't have construction over the ground, preventing that. We like to have the water reintroduced into the groundwater, which avoids surface water runoff that causes damage to streams, as well as localized flooding. MDE also is responsible for sewage treatment plants. We set the discharge limit for plants and construction criteria for the plants. MDE is responsible for septic systems and wells. That's on-site sewage disposal and wells. And those things oftentimes come as a pair because one of the key interests is to avoid having septic systems contaminating wells. People don't want to obviously have their septic system and wells connected to each other underground. However, the work is often done, again, at the local government level by the environmental, basically the health department, environmental health department, which is actually an arm of the state technically. However, because they're locally situated, many people think of them as being a part of the county. However, they are actually, the environmental health director is, if I'm not mistaken, actually connected with the State Department of Health. All right, next slide, please. The Department of Environment also sets water quality standards. We monitor the waters according to those standards, and if waters don't meet those standards, they're considered to be impaired. And impaired waters, in many cases, require additional attention to remediate them and restore them. And the limit on pollution going into waters is determined through technical scientific studies and memorialized in what are called total maximum daily load findings. And that basically sets the limits on pollutions from all different sources, either from the landscape or from point sources like a wastewater treatment plant. And then those limits determine how permits are set to control the pollution going into our water so that we meet our water quality standards. MDE also sets fish consumption advisories. So we monitor fish tissue for toxic pollutants, things like PCBs or mercury or other things that can cause human health problems. And if we find those in fish, then we issue advisories that limit the number of fish people should eat per any given period of time. Or we might just put a complete ban on eating certain type of fish. And we're also very concerned about people who oftentimes people will sustain part of their diet with fish. And so we try to reach out to particular communities that are at risk in that way. We also manage shellfish harvesting area through monitoring to make sure bacteria don't get into shellfish that people sometimes like to eat raw. That's not very common up in the Deep Creek Lake area. However, that is one of our functions. MDE also manages wetlands and waterways. So wetlands would be oftentimes associated with streams up in the Deep Creek Lake area. Those would be the non-tidal wetlands, but we also deal with tidal wetlands down in the Chesapeake Bay area. So the waterways are the streams themselves. So if you have to construct a bridge or a driveway over a waterway, or if you have to do construction along the shorelines of the lake itself, oftentimes you'll need what they call a waterway construction permit, and that would come from MDE. MDE is also responsible for dam safety. And obviously there's a big dam on Deep Creek Lake, but there are also many smaller dams across the state. And these can also be quite a hazard. And oftentimes they're privately owned, and oftentimes they're not well maintained. And so that can create a serious hazard, particularly if development occurs downstream of those dams. And that's something that has occurred across the state, where a dam is sitting there and some people don't realize it, and they do construction and development below the dams, and that can increase the hazard of those dams. So that we have a program that oversees all of that. Next slide, please. Finally, the water that we drink or we irrigate with. MDE is responsible for managing the water resources in general. through what we call water allocation permits. And in the case of Deep Creek Lake and the Deep Creek Lake Dam, a water allocation permit is related to the use of that water to generate electricity. But as you realize, that water has multiple uses. It's not just generating electricity as it goes through the turbines associated with the dam, but it's used then downstream for whitewater rafting, and obviously used in the lake itself for recreation, as well as, now that the lake has been there for a long time, we've basically established the norm that it is itself a natural resource with the fisheries that Julie spoke about. In addition to managing the volume of water through allocation permits, we manage the quality of drinking water. Again, a federal U.S. Environmental Protection Agency delegated authority that the state has to basically manage the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is a federal law. So that gives you an idea of the many activities that the Maryland Department of Environment's involved in. And if you have questions or you need to be referred to anyone with a particular question, again, my contact information is on that slide that we saw earlier, and you'll have access to those slides. And again, I want to thank the Maryland Extension Service and Ashley, as well as the Deep Creek Lake Foundation for hosting today's event, which I think is a fantastic event. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jim. And next, we're going to hear from Eric Boyd with the U.S. Geological Survey.
Hi, Ashley, can you hear me?
Yes, sounds good.
Okay. Hi, I'm Eric Boyd with the U.S. Geological Survey. I just want to thank Ashley for putting all this together. This is a great information exchange. I've already learned a lot that I didn't know about Deep Creek. I lived down an accident, so this is actually very helpful information for me as well. So the U.S. Geological Survey, we're a federal agency under the Department of the Interior. And some other agencies under the Department of Interior you might know of are National Park Service, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and Bureau of Land Management. Our role at Deep Creek Lake essentially is data collection. We act as an unbiased third party for data collection. We are a non-regulatory agency, so we don't make decisions based on the data we collect. We just follow, we have a very stringent guideline for data collection, and it goes through an extensive review process at the end and is available for publication. USGS was founded in 1879, and our oldest stream gauge was founded in 1898. So we have over 100 years of data collection experience and a massive water database to mine into. All of our data is available online for the public. It goes up as provisional data as we collect it. And then eventually, once it goes through the review process, it is then available for scientific reports and can be cited in any sort of scientific literature. Next slide, please. So currently, we have 3 Streamflow monitoring gauges on the tributaries that go into Deep Creek: Cherry Creek, North Glade Run over in Swanton, and Arrowhead Run, which is tucked in right next to the movie theater. Cherry Creek is the largest watershed of the tribs that feed into Deep Creek at 13.1 square miles. North Glade and Arrowhead are both a good bit smaller. There's a lot more tribs to the lake, but currently these are the 3 ones that are funded and monitored. There was an old gauge on Poland Run that was discontinued back in, I think, 2012, just due to some difficulties in the data collection on there because it was such a small watershed, and it was just the data there just wasn't up to par. We also have another gauge. It's not a trib, but down on the Youghiogheny, about 1.5 miles below where Deep Creek Lake feeds into the Yough after the dam. We have a stream gauge there that can you can see the regulation rises and falls as they release water from the dam during the day. And all these sites, again, like I said before, you can access all this data online at any time. The 8-digit number that is next to the names of the streams, those are the identifying numbers that you can search for those on the USGS website and you can search any data. So I'll explain on the next slide. So if you go to that URL at the top, waterdata.usgs.gov/NWIS, NWIS is National Water Information System. If you go to that page, you can look at data from any stream. We have a stream gauge on in the entire country, and see exactly how it's flowing at any given time in history or current flow conditions. You can follow those instructions below. Sometimes these websites are a little difficult to navigate, but if you click on the current conditions on that page and then go to the state, so you can go to Maryland. If you live in West Virginia, you can view the data there as well. And then there'll be a button you can click for a statewide stream flow real-time table. And on that page, there'll be a list of all the stream gauges that have real-time data. You can view them as a graph, you can view them as a table, you can select, like I said, any time range that you would like to see. And they're listed below the 4 tribs that feed into the lake. That's how far back we have data. So Cherry Creek is the oldest. We've had data there since 2007. We thank DNR for continuing that partnership for so long. And North Glade and Arrowhead are more recent. And again, as I said before, Pull and Run was discontinued, but you can still, that data is still available online. Next slide. In addition to the Streamflow data, we also have a Precipitation Gauge, which is located over at North Glade Run. We have 2 units there. One is a tipping bucket, so it has a little funnel. Water drops down and hits a little kind of like a teeter-totter mechanism. It causes a click and it logs that as a preset value. Those can get jammed with snow, and obviously in Garrett County we have massive snow. So we have another unit next to it. It has a large opening and can actually detect snowfall. So the precip data at that site is pretty accurate and is a good indicator, in at least on the eastern side of the lake, what's going on with the rain. Go to the next slide, please. And then additionally, we have a new gauge we built last summer, which is actually a lake level gauge. And this was in cooperation with the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation. And as Jim George mentioned, sometimes the foundation could step in to fill in funding gaps. This was a situation where there was a need for a lake level monitoring gauge, and they were able to partner with us and fund this gauge. It's located over on the bridge next to the Discovery Center at the park. So if you've ever driven across and seen the new solar panels sticking off the side, that's our gauge there. It also has a water temperature probe. So real-time water temperature monitoring for that particular location in the lake. And so this is just the lake level, whereas the tribs are stream flow. So that's actually, those tributary gauges are monitoring the volume of water coming into the lake. We monitor that in cubic feet per second. That's the unit you'll see online. Essentially, a cubic foot of water is the size of a bucket. So you figure that the number it's showing, for instance, Cherry Creek says right now it's flowing about 34 CFS. That's for every second, there's basically 34 buckets of water coming by that gauge every second. And then North Glade is about 9.5, and Arrowhead, being very small, is only about 2.5 CFS at the moment. Let's see, next slide, please. And there's been some discussion of some future monitoring efforts at the lake. None of this is concrete. These have just been discussions. Any of this work requires additional funding. USGS does not just go out and build gauges. We have funding partners, cooperators. So DNR is a cooperator, Deep Creek Watershed Foundation is a cooperator, and we fund a portion of it. But any future monitoring efforts require funding. But we have talked about putting additional precipitation stations in around the lake, possibly one at Cherry Creek, possibly one down on the Yacht and Hoys, maybe some others. Because as anyone who lives around the lake knows, the precip is all over the place. I mean, sometimes it's raining at my house, an accident, and I drive up to where you can see the wisp and there's no rain going on. Same thing with snow. So we really need those additional precip gauges to develop the water budget model for the lake. There's been talk of some additional stream gauges, some real-time gauges, or some seasonal data collection where we would just go out and maybe get flow measurements at different times of the year, not actually have a monitoring location that's monitoring real time. And then we've had discussions for doing some sediment load monitoring, trying to target some of the tributaries that are inputting more, a lot of sediment into the lake to counteract if dredging is required, or if some of these coves are getting slightly shallow. We need stakeholders need data to understand which coves need more monitoring. So again, this has all just been in discussions, but if the funding's there, USGS will gladly help with monitoring effort. And that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Eric. Very good. And I'll just make a comment that Jim entered in the chat that the USGS Stream Gauge website allows people to receive text messages that are triggered by high flow or low flow events. So that's a pretty cool service as well. So thank you, Eric.
Yeah, I'd also like to say something, Ashley. The temperature gauge and the lake level gauge appears on the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation website. So if you're interested in seeing what's going on in the lake at a given time, please take a look at the website that I gave you.
All right, thank you. And with that, we are going to hear from Mr. Bob Sutton next. He is the president of the Deep Creek Lake Property Owners Association.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Deep Creek Lake Property Owners Association is basically a advocacy group for property owners around the lake. Our website is www.deepcreeklakepropertyownersassociation.com. You can go to the next slide. We represent about 950 properties around the lake right now. We'd encourage anybody listening that's not a member, please go on the website. You can easily join. It's $30 a year. Our mission basically is to advocate on behalf of the property owners of the lake area for various things that are going around. To accomplish this, we promote, preserve, and protect the quality of life, environment, recreational opportunities, historic sites in historic areas on Deep Creek Lake and in the watershed area. Next slide. The things we really do are communication. We're a primary source of verified news and information to stakeholders around the lake. We put out what we call e-blasts anytime there's any news breaking about the lake area. For example, last year when we had the COVID-19 issues, I think we put out something like 22 e-blasts alerting the public and our members what was going on in Garrett County with respect to the rules and regulations and what was open and what wasn't open, to keep people informed. We do the same thing about various things happening around the lake. So I think on an average, we probably put out 30 or 40 e-blasts every year to members. We also have a newsletter that goes out quarterly, has various articles about the lake in it. We have a lot of informational things we put up on the website. So we try to keep people informed. Funding on critical projects. We're not really a funding organization, but we do have, some funds that we can provide. Sorry about that. we provide funding for the fireworks on 4th of July. We just purchased one of the water quality meters and donated it to the Watershed Foundation for installation in one of the coves. So that's the type of thing we get involved with. We're also represented on various policy making organizations and boards around the county and state level. So we have a lot of good contacts. Next slide. I guess I preceded my slide, but this talks about the dispatch, which is our newsletter, and the e-blasts. I forgot this was on there. But some of the things we talked about were COVID-19, various lake issues. We also work with natural resources and lake management to design, publish, and distribute the safe boating and safe towing brochures that you'll see around various businesses in the county that are free to the public. We tend to work very closely with NRP and also DNR. We just basically wrote the regulation for minimum wake zones at the lake along with the NRP and the lake manager. Got that approved, and the first minimum wake zone for the lake has been approved by the Secretary of DNR for North Glade Cove. We put criteria together because there was no criteria available for what could be considered for a minimum wake area on the lake. So we worked with the various agencies to come up with the criteria and had those approved by the BAAC. And now that's going to make it easier for lake manager to look at applications or suggestions and decline or forward them based on the criteria. Next slide. This is kind of a long one, but in a nutshell, the POA has been around since the 1930s. We have an 18-member board of directors that are very active in various projects around the lake. Things we've done in the past include when fracking came around, we were very involved in getting fracking regulations put in for the watershed before the governor actually banned it. We were involved in gypsy moth eradication several years ago. We were involved in the watershed management plan development, and a lot of other things like that. Now we're looking at the solar issue. There's a lot of interest in putting solar panel farms in the lake watershed. So we're encouraging the county to develop some regulations for that, which right now there's none other than normal zoning, which didn't consider solar panels back in the mid-1970s. We're also a member of the NOMS, which is the North American Lake Management Society. They have a lot of information on lakes and operating lakes and different lake problems and lake issues. And we've worked very closely with Julie on the hydrilla and zebra mussel issues that the biologists are trying to prevent. So we're basically involved in almost everything around the lake. I can't remember if there's a next slide or not. Yeah, we've provided funding on different things around the lake, including the invasive species, and we installed signs around the roadways to warn people of clean and dry your boat before you put it in the lake. We've done a lot of preservation things that I mentioned. We worked a lot with MDE on the water appropriation permit that was recently approved back in the fall of 2020. And we also we bought AEDs for the county sheriff a few years ago. We also provided two-way radios for the NRP for a while. So we've do a lot around the lake for funding and for different projects that we feel that are important. So I think that's the last slide.
All right, thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Just say if you have any questions, emails and so forth are on the website. Please contact us. And if you're not a member, please join.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you so much. All right, and up next, we are going to hear from Brookfield Renewable, and we have Brian Noonan with us this afternoon or this morning.
Thanks, Ashley. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep, sounds great.
Okay, and we also have Kevin Moriarty.
Yes, I don't know that he's a co-host yet. Let me find his name.
Okay, thank you. Well, in the meantime, I'll introduce myself. My name is Brian Noonan. I'm with Brookfield Renewable. I'm a manager of stakeholder relations. And today we're going to talk about balancing stakeholder interests on Deep Creek Lake. And first and foremost, I just want to thank everybody for participating in this educational event. I'd like to thank Ashley and Roberta, as well as the Deep Creek Foundation, for facilitating this. We've been very fortunate to have a lot of great partners in the region, so we're very appreciative for that and for this opportunity.
Okay, Mr. Kevin has been listed as a co-host, so he should be able to unmute if you need him to.
You able to jump on, Kevin?
Hey, good morning. It's Kevin Moriarty. I'm the manager of operations for the hydroelectric plant at Deep Creek. Brian, I'm going to stay muted because I'm at one of the other plants and there's a noisy background. I'll unmute if I need to.
Okay, all right, great. I think Kevin's at Piney, which is one of our facilities in Clarion County, Pennsylvania. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about, speaking about balancing stakeholder interests on Deep Creek Lake. If you could just jump to the next slide, Ashley. So this is, we're a publicly traded company, so this is some legal, a legal statement that we include in all our presentations. I'll just leave it up for a minute here so folks can read through it. Okay, we'll jump to the next slide. So we're going to talk about our presence at Deep Creek. And you just jump to the next slide, Ashley. So we're going to start with giving some history of Deep Creek Lake. So construction began in 1923. It was initiated by a Garrett County businessman who wanted to harness the power of the water on the Yakagani to produce hydropower. The construction included a powerhouse on the Yakagani, as well as an earthen concrete core dam that spans Deep Creek. Production of power began in 1925 at a level of 60 megawatts of installed capacity, and we sell power into the PJM wholesale market. We have one generating unit. The powerhouse contains 2 vertical Francis units. We supply enough energy to provide clean renewable power to 2,500 homes annually. And the Deep Creek Dam has created Deep Creek Lake and resulted in recreational opportunities both on the lake and downstream. Next slide, please. So Deep Creek Dam is located on Deep Creek, around 1.4 miles upstream from the confluence of Deep Creek and the Yakagani. It impounds a reservoir, which is Deep Creek Lake, which is 3,900 acres. It's located in Garrett County, Maryland. The reservoir is owned and managed by Maryland DNR, as Julie mentioned earlier. The normal full pond elevation is 2461. There's some other information on here with respect to just some kind of neat information on the max height of the dam, the length, crest elevation. But I'll jump to the next slide to get into the stakeholder information. So working with the local community, we strive to integrate ourselves into the local communities where we operate. This includes collaborating on projects that benefit the community, making charitable donations to local nonprofits who fit our core mission, having staff available to act as a point of contact for questions or concerns that may arise from local residents and business owners, using local businesses and contractors on projects, and putting out public safety messaging campaigns to ensure the safety of those who recreate on and around the dams, which we do quite a bit of. So I'd imagine folks have seen these ads to the right here on this slide. Public safety is our number one priority. So we do an extensive amount of advertising and collaborations with partners to ensure that public safety is at the forefront. Next slide, please. So Deep Creek Lake is the economic engine of the region, as everybody knows, and we work closely with our partners both on the lake and downstream to ensure positive outcomes. At the dam, we have 2 full-time employees and have hired seasonal employees for maintenance work as well. As dam and public safety is our number one priority, we conduct a lot of maintenance work at the dam and hire local contractors. Recently, this included a local contractor, Beitzel Construction, who performed a large amount of work. This was, I think, 2 years ago, right, Kevin?
Correct.
Yep. It was a large maintenance project that we undertook. We've also worked with local government to partner, such as drawing down the lake for a local sewer line project in 2016 and for a water line project just recently in 2021. Next slide, please. So next, we're going to talk about our water appropriation permit. Next slide, please. So the current permit was issued in September of 2020. So we just recently went through the permit process, which I'd imagine a number of you are familiar with. This was a very exhaustive process where we took input from all stakeholders in the region. Everybody had a chance to weigh in, and we worked with MDE, who issues the permit, to balance those interests, across the board. So the process involved an extensive consultation as well as 3 stakeholder meetings, a public information meeting, and the opportunity to submit comments. And the following groups were represented at the stakeholder meetings: the property owners of Deep Creek Lake, Garrett County, the Chamber of Commerce, the town of Friendsville, American Whitewater, the Friends of Deep Creek Lake, Trout Unlimited, DNR, MDE, Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, Deep Creek Lake Policy and Review Board, Precision Rafting, as well as us. So you can see there was an extensive outreach effort. Everybody had a chance to weigh in on their respective interests. Next slide, please. So with the water appropriation and use permit, we have reporting requirements that include semi-annual water withdrawal reports, monthly temperature enhancement reports from June to September, and an annual report on lake level monitoring, temperature monitoring, minimum flow release monitoring, dissolved oxygen monitoring, and releases unsuitable for whitewater recreation, as well as zebra mussel monitoring. We also provide river gauge funding for Hoy's Run in Oakland. Sorry. Next slide, please. So this is the rule band and operations protocols. This just kind of gives an overview of the upper and lower rule band, which is the upper elevation that we can operate within, as well as the lower elevation that we can operate within at different times during the year. And again, these numbers were determined in consultation with various stakeholders to represent a balanced interest of those stakeholders on the lake. Next slide, please. So this is the lake level curve. I won't get into this too much. We do have this on our website, safewaters.com, which also provides water level and elevation data at Deep Creek Lake. So these lake levels are since 2013. It just shows that we've been within the rule bands, been operated right in the middle there from 2013 all the way through the next slide to 20. I think the most recent one we have is 2020. So this just kind of gives an overview of the upper and lower rule band and where we operated. Next slide, please. So balancing stakeholders and stakeholder interests. So we maintain relationships with numerous stakeholders. These include the below stakeholders, amongst others. So as mentioned, I won't go through this list again, but we've had a great working relationship with partners throughout the region, to include the Watershed Foundation, the Deep Creek Property Owners Association, the American Whitewater, Friends of Deep Creek Lake, Town of Friendsville. So we've been extremely fortunate to have these great partners in the region. We've worked very closely together, collaboratively, with the county and agencies. So we've really enjoy being there and enjoy working with our partners. Next slide, please. So this really gets into the stakeholder issues that we need to balance and account for. And I think this gives a really good overview to everybody, on the different interests that we really have to accommodate for that came about through the permit. And again, the permit was issued with the goal in mind of balancing those interests. And it's across the board, and there's both interest on the lake as well as downstream that needed to be accounted for. And those stakeholders had a chance to weigh in just recently. We received the permit in 2020, but the exhaustive process started well prior to that. So water levels, obviously we have to stay within the operating rule band to ensure that lake levels are within the guidelines. Temperature enhancement, we have to maintain water temperatures less than 25 degrees Celsius in the Akagani between the project tail race and Sangaron during the months of June, July, and August. This is done to ensure the health of aquatic wildlife. Minimum flow releases. So we maintain a bypass system at the project to maintain a minimum flow of 40 CFS in the river downstream of the project tail race. A reduction in the minimum flow may be requested by MDE when the reservoir levels are 1 foot or more below the lower rule band. And we also have to account for whitewater releases, where the intent is to enhance recreational whitewater enjoyment from the project tail race to Friendsville. There's 2 types, standard and special releases, and 2 examples of the special releases include Gully Week and the Friendsville Upper Yacht Race. And these are subject to rule band and temperature enhancement releases. So what factors decide when to generate? Temperature enhancement releases, whitewater releases, discretionary generation, current elevation and rule band, weather forecast and flows, and plant outages. So as you've seen from this presentation, there's a whole host of factors that go into the way that we manage water on the lake. And these were developed in consultation with a plethora of stakeholders throughout the region in order to really balance the interests of everybody. So we've been very fortunate. We have great partners. Everybody came together during the permitting process last year, where everybody who had concerns, opinions, and wanted to ensure that their respective interests were represented, came to the table and outlined those things. And MDE did a tremendous job of really facilitating that and ensuring that those interests were balanced and accounted for. So very thorough, exhaustive process that did result in re-permitting in September of 2020. We continue to adhere, we'll always adhere to that permit within the operating guidelines and work to maintain these relationships with stakeholders. And, I think it's very important, or I know it's very important to maintain these relationships, throughout. And, this opportunity to present today, I felt was a wonderful chance to really get to folks in the region and kind of outline, why water is managed the way it is, and, to kind of just outline the various stakeholders that have an interest at Deep Creek Lake. So I really appreciate everybody getting onto this and learning about it. And I appreciate Ashley and Roberta for facilitating it, and David at the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, and I just want to thank all of our other partners throughout the region for being great partners. So thank you. And this is my contact information. So anybody that has any questions, I think my number's always available. It's out there. I get a lot of calls, with various questions. I always answer no matter what. And, my email address is on there as well. And I'm always accessible. And, you can ask me anything, anytime. So very much appreciated.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Great information. So with that, we have one polling question we want to put up to get some feedback from the participants. And then we are going to dive into a couple of questions that we received prior to the session today that people had emailed to me. So this is just one question. If folks could, again, just answer as you see fit. And once we get the results of this, we will go on to a Q&A session. Okay, just a couple more seconds. Thank you. If you guys have questions, again, we encourage you to enter them in the chat. Speakers will be answering them as time allows. So we may not get to all of them today, but if we don't get your answer to your question live during this presentation, then we will be sure and email you with an answer as soon as we can. All right, and with that, the first question we got was, you can see it here on the slide. And I believe, oh goodness, just kidding. Let's try again, sorry about that. Can everybody see the question here? It's, I'd like to know what organizations oversee development of the lake as it pertains to any long-term planning for growth. Would it make sense to have a governing body the way Oakland does? And I understand that the lake area would need to be incorporated to do this. How much would that cost? So Gary, Aaron Halt, the Watershed Coordinator, is going to give us some information on this.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, the local part of your county government will be the Department of Planning and Land Management. We kind of oversee the county's comprehensive plan. And then we also have some ordinances that are relevant to development, like the subdivision ordinance, the zoning ordinance in Deep Creek, the sensitive areas ordinance. And then we also have state and federal policies and regulations, for example, like the FEMA floodplain requirements. As far as the municipal incorporation, I put up some information on the procedure for implementing that. Whether it makes sense would be up to the citizens that live there and the county commissioners. So I can't really comment on that. And on tax revenues, we really don't track those by district. We do put our budget up on the county's website, and you can check that out there. If you have any questions, you can also reach out to the tax office.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. The next question we have had to do with keeping with shoreline erosion and loss of old growth trees, and it had to do with keeping lake levels a bit lower to help with some of this. You guys can see the question that was submitted here, and Brian, I believe, is going to try and answer that for us.
Sure. Is there any chance that the written response is in here? Okay, sorry, thanks. So I did take some time to put together a written response because it is, it was a pretty in-depth question and answer. So stakeholder management, as we just discussed, it requires the accounting for several stakeholders on the lake and downstream. So in response to balancing these interests with appropriate water levels, MDE developed the upper rule band, the lower rule band. So during our recent permit process, as indicated, we just recently went through this, and MDE actually modified permit condition 14 to reduce the length of time during which an excursion up to 1/3 of a foot above the upper rule band can persist. So previously, that was 21 days, and in the prior permit and the current permit, that was reduced to 10 days above elevation to 2461 feet. This was done in conjunction with stakeholders in an effort to prevent potential erosion. I did want to note that erosion is caused by a host of factors and is greatly impacted by boat traffic, which includes the size and speed of the boats and the large subsequent wake and waves that they leave upon the shoreline. So that's a huge factor. And as a result of that, due to the high traffic boat weekends on both Memorial Day weekend and July 4th weekend, the new permit also requires that water levels not exceed 2461 for both of those weekends. So in short, this concern was addressed in the recent permit in a number of different ways.
All right, thank you, Brian. Okay, and up next is we got several different questions that had to do with wake boats. So again, we compiled them here with a lot of different details, but in general, Julie Bortz is going to take a couple minutes to verbally answer some of these questions and give you some additional resources and guidance on where you can find answers to these questions.
Thanks, Ashley. And yeah, as Brian mentioned, wakes can actually cause shoreline erosion, and we're mindful of that. But currently there is no actual regulations. And again, I'm a biologist, but I did speak with NRP and our representatives from the boat advisory, the BAAC, Boat Act Advisory Committee, and they kind of gave me some guidance on this. So currently there's no regulations on wake boats as a vessel. However, in Deep Creek Lake, we do have a regulation on the size of vessels that's allowed, and that's a maximum of 26 feet. And so that kind of limits, to some extent, the size of the wakes that can be generated. But there's actually, when it comes to regulating the activity of wake surfing and wakeboarding, towing, that kind of thing, there's what's called like a distance regulation. So with regard to wake surfing, which is the act of being surfing behind a boat without being tethered to the boat, there's what's called a 200-foot rule. And so the operator, the boat operator, and the surfer must be at least 200 feet from any object, whether it be a dock, a shoreline, or another person or boat. That's the regulation associated with wake surfing as the activity. And then if you're being towed behind a boat, so if you're wakeboarding, if you're water skiing, or being towed in a tube, the minimum distance regulation is 100 foot. So if people see any potential violations of either of those distance regulations, then they are encouraged to call the 800 number that I had showed on the slide for Natural Resource Police, and that goes to a dispatch office, and they can dispatch an officer to the location. Obviously, having a dock number, a cove name would be ideal so that they can get to the right location. So those are kind of the current regulations there. With regard to what can be done about wake boats, we, DNR, and I think the stakeholders, it comes up pretty regularly at what's called the Deep Creek Lake Policy and Review Board, which is a board that is appointed by the governor that advises the Secretary of DNR concerning issues regarding the lake and stakeholder interest. And it's come up several times there. And that's probably the best thing that people could do is it's an opportunity for the public to provide comment to the Policy and Review Board. And that comment can then be taken to the Secretary. If there were to be regulations imposed at some point in the future, more than likely that proposed regulation would be proposed to the Policy and Review Board, and then from there it could go to the BAAC, which is also part of DNR, the Boating Act Advisory Committee, which would then consider the regulation. And that's an example of that. If you're familiar with the Policy and Review Board and some of the activities they've done, is the Sky Valley Minimum Wake buoy. I think Bob mentioned that with the Property Owners Association. That was basically run through that same process. So if you have concerns or comments about wake boats or those kinds of activities, I would encourage you to attend one of the Policy and Review Board meetings, and they meet quarterly. And I put the link in the chat to the Policy and Review Board. I also put a link to a sign up where you can sign up to receive automated information from us, DNR, as well as from when the Policy and Review Board meets. I usually send out a reminder about that meeting along with a link to that. So the other thing I would say, and this came from the Boat Act Advisory Committee person whose name is Mike Simonson. He basically said, we are responsible for our wakes. As boaters, you are responsible for your wake. And so that said, there's been a strong effort to try and encourage boaters to mind their wake, to be mindful of what any damage that their wake is causing. And so there's been a big educational push to try and educate boaters of all activities to be mindful of that in and around the lake. And with that and all the interest that wake boats and that kind of activity has received, we as the administrative council actually worked with the University of Maryland Global Campus graduate students and professors to do kind of a gray literature review of how that issue is being tackled by other states around the country, because the technology with regard to wake boats and wake surfing is advancing very rapidly, and we're not the only lake that's struggling with how to manage that and those impacts. And it's, again, not all specific to wake boats. It's any wake that's generated from a boat can cause impacts on the shoreline. And so we actually worked with the University of Maryland students and their professors to do kind of a review, and you can actually see the results of that project on the Garrett County Watershed website. But that was, I think, 2 or 3 years ago, and we've thought about revisiting that because, again, the technology is evolving so quickly with regard to the boat manufacturers as well as the sport of surfing. And so we want to stay on top of that. So again, if you have concerns or questions, I would encourage you to attend one of the Deep Creek Lake Policy and Review Board meetings, and you can express that concern there, and it can kind of be transferred up to the department that way. And I think that's hopefully covered it as best as I could. If you have any additional questions on violations or regulations, I would encourage you to reach out to Sergeant Mike Friend at NRP in the slides provided previously. And again, I want to say thank you to Ashley for pulling this all together, and to David and the foundation for starting this conversation, and to all the stakeholders here. We work collaboratively as best we can to manage this wonderful resource with all of our stakeholders, with Brookfield, with USGS, with the Deep Creek Watershed Foundation, with the Extension Service, with Garrett County and MDE and the POA. And we are thankful for this opportunity to share the information, but also thankful for our collaboration and partnerships and all the contributions that we're getting from the stakeholders to help in our efforts. So again, thank you to everybody on this. It's definitely a group effort. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Julie. And with that, I don't know if our speakers, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording. I saw that there are a few questions in the chat box. I don't know if the speakers want to take a quick look. I'll give you a few minutes if you want to answer. If not, we will follow up directly with you via email with an answer to your questions in the next week or so. All right, and with that, I do thank all of the speakers, all of the participants, of course, Deep Creek Watershed Foundation for sponsoring these Brunch and Learns, and we will hopefully be following up with you in the next week or so with a link to the recording, a PDF of this presentation with the slides, and also with our next Brunch and Learn topic and date.